Hello and welcome to episode 90 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. In the last episode, we talked about our top 5 movies of 2020. And even though I wanted to put it in my list, I decided to leave off Small Axe, Steve McQueen's 5-film anthology, mainly because I didn't know how to include it. So for this episode, we're doing something we've never done before and discussing 5 movies as one. Each movie can technically stand alone, but since they were obviously designed to be seen as a whole collection, we're going to tackle the whole series.
McQueen's stature as a filmmaker was only solidified with the release of Small Axe, which chronicles the real-life experiences of a West Indian community in London from the 1960s to the 1980s. Each episode was widely praised by critics, and the series as a whole has been lauded as being on par with Krzysztof Kieślowski's Decalogue. It may also prove to be influential in the ever-evolving definitions of film and television, as Small Axe has won several film awards, both for individual films and for the anthology as a whole, and has notably been nominated for 2 Golden Globes in television categories.
But however you define it, Small Axe is a remarkable piece of filmmaking.
And we're excited at the challenge of digging into it all at once. Keep listening.
These are new types of human beings. They are not demoralized or defeated persons. They are leaders, but are rooted deep among those they lead.
We mustn't be victims, but protagonists of our stories.
Don't you think it's time things were different?
As individuals, we have an impossible battle. As a collective, we stand a chance.
All right, so since we're technically talking about 5 or so films today, we couldn't just pick one clip. So what you heard there was the trailer for Small Axe, Steve McQueen's 5-part film thing.
Yeah.
That originally aired on the BBC and then made its way over to Amazon Prime, which is how I watched it. I'm assuming it's also how you watched it, Ryan.
That is how I watched it, yes.
A movie series that I had seen before our last episode, our favorites of 2020.
Right.
I think you had seen like 2 of the movies before
I had,
that.
yeah. And I really screwed it up. I watched,
Okay.
because I did, so, you know, again, as we alluded to in the intro, this is a hard to classify project. They are movies. I mean, Mangrove is over 2 hours long. A couple of them are about 1 hour and 20, and then a couple are closer to an hour.
Yeah.
So you can't call it a TV show like that. The episodes don't connect.
Right.
So it's not really a season or a series like that. But they were released together as a group of 5. And so most people who included it on their year-end lists went with one, and they went with Lovers Rock for the most part. And so I watched that one on its own. And out of context, Lovers Rock feels
Incomplete, maybe.
incomplete, and it feels like you've been dropped into something that it just doesn't have the impact. It didn't have the impact on me.
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, well, you know, that was fine. And I think that there were a lot of things in 2020 where I saw that people were like, amazing, and I was like, that was fine. And so I thought, okay, maybe Lovers Rock, Small Axe isn't. It was fine. I would watch more, but if it's all like Lovers Rock, maybe not. And
Were you kind of a little surprised at how often it had been on those lists and how high they were up on? I mean, for a lot of these lists,
seeing
this
it
was like
alone,
number 1 or number 2.
Yeah,
you know?
just seeing it alone, definitely. And then you were like, oh no, I mean, I know they're standalone, but you got to watch them in order. I don't think it would have the same impact. So I was, all right. And so I watched Mangrove, and then I didn't watch Lovers Rock again, but oh yeah, absolutely. After Mangrove, Lovers Rock is so important. And then once we decided to do it, I went back and rewatched Mangrove, Lovers Rock. I watched them all in order again. It blew me away.
Yeah. And it's funny because I saw that too, obviously, that Lovers Rock was hitting all these lists. But one of the things I think strikes me as odd about so many of these lists and critics talking so much about Lovers Rock is if you had to pick one of those 5, that would seem to not be able to fully stand on its own outside of them.
It would be Lovers Rock.
It probably would be Lovers Rock.
Definitely.
Because it feels like a snapshot.
Yeah.
I love everything about it, and I love it for that. But especially if you're like me and you're going into this knowing next to nothing about the West Indian community at all in Britain.
Right.
I had to have Mangrove.
I think everybody does.
Yeah.
I think it's a little irresponsible to pick Lovers Rock out, and a little bit inside, a little bit like if you've seen Small Axe, you would know that Lovers Rock is the best one. But if you haven't seen Small Axe and all you watch is Lovers Rock, then you don't quite know why everybody's talking about this.
Right. And also, I think even Steve McQueen, he released them in an order for that reason.
Right.
And here's one thing I thought was interesting. I was listening to an interview with him I forget the guy's name. He's the editor-in-chief of Esquire. I'll link to it in the show notes. It's like a half-hour interview that you can find on YouTube. He said the only two movies he initially knew he wanted to make was a movie about the Mangrove 9 and a movie, it ended up becoming Red, White, and Blue, but he knew he wanted to make a movie about a black British police officer, someone who tries to assimilate into that power structure. Mm-hmm. It ended up being the story of Leroy Logan, but that was really originally the only two movies he knew he wanted to make. The other ones kind of came out of him working with some writers, because this was originally supposed to be, actually a TV series, miniseries for BBC.
Yeah.
So he had a writer's room, but then it ended up becoming more like 5 unique films, and he ended up just kind of paring it down to working with like one other writer on each movie.
Yeah, the same writer on 3 of them.
Yes.
So he worked with Alistair Siddons on Mangrove, on Alex Wheatle, and Education. And then he worked with Cordia Newland on Lovers Rock and Red, White, and Blue.
I just found it interesting that it was really Mangrove and Red, White, and Blue were the only 2 movies that he knew he wanted to make. So all that goes to say, like we were talking about Lovers Rock kind of being the one that is getting all the high praise. But, we are here to definitely look at this as one project. How did it speak to us as a whole?
Yeah.
Now, I watched all of it through a second time.
I did rewatch Mangrove and Lovers Rock this time. So I rewatched those. I did the whole thing. I watched it in order. So first time for the last 3 episodes.
Yeah.
But, and it does make me want to watch the rest of it again, because even just watching Mangrove and Lovers Rock again, it was better.
It was so much better the second time.
Not that it wasn't good the first time.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, you had asked if we could bump up our recording night one night. And at first I was a little irritated about that.
So, I'm sorry.
No. But the thing is, it made me binge it. It made me sit down and watch it in large chunks.
A little bit more as a whole.
Watch them bleed one right into the other. And man, was I blown away.
Yep.
I mean, to really view it as one project is really astounding. I'm assuming you felt the same way I did, that we're both in high praise of this as a project.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see the point in picking it apart. Just quality-wise, I don't think that there are there's glaring weaknesses.
Yeah.
And to shift gears a little bit, we also talked at the end of last episode that it's February, and so Black History Month. And this was a fascinating story in Black history I had no conception of.
No.
I knew that there was a West Indian population in England, but I didn't really know much about it or its culture or its identity.
I don't think I knew much about that other than, if I'm being honest, I don't think I even knew much about that other than like Steve McQueen himself.
Right.
Like when he won the Oscar for 12 Years a Slave, which was the first Steve McQueen movie I watched.
Yeah.
I kind of dug into him a little bit and got a little bit into his background.
Yeah.
And that's about the extent of what I knew about the entire West Indian community in Britain.
Strangely enough, this last year I read a book called Queenie by Candace Carty-Williams, which I loved. It was one of my favorite books I read last year, and that's about West Indian people in England. And then I read White Teeth by Zadie Smith, which is also about West Indians. So I knew that there were at least enough people to populate 2 novels that I read last year. But the history and England's history of racism on its shores, I had known nothing about.
Right.
I knew that England had a history around the world through its colonialism.
Yes, yeah.
But I had always assumed that most European countries had kept racism from their shores just by keeping black people from their shores.
Right. That it was a really fascinating and eye-opening thing for me to watch a movie about racism, specifically racism against black people, that wasn't an American story.
Right.
I honestly don't know what I thought before that. Of like, I kind of thought racism against black people was kind of a uniquely American problem, even though I was, like you said, very aware of the colonialism and the history that Britain is definitely tied to, along with, Spain and Portugal and France and a lot of other countries. And my feeling was always one of, but history of racism against black people is uniquely and terribly bad in America, and it has a lot to do with the transatlantic slave trade and slavery that was occurring in America.
Which is true.
But I just did not know that much about that same history in the UK, in Britain.
Yeah.
And I think that also speaks to that country also having a lack of these stories being told.
Right.
And this was part of Steve McQueen's goal, was that these were lost histories. And he wanted to make, especially Mangrove, he wanted to make that movie because that generation was starting to get older and start to die out.
Yeah.
And he wanted to make sure that
they saw the story told.
People in Britain saw this story.
Yeah. So just on an educational level, this movie is incredible. I want to talk a second. You mentioned Steve McQueen. You dug into his history. Had you seen a lot of Steve McQueen movies before Small Axe, other than 12 Years a Slave?
Just Widows.
Okay.
And I love Widows.
You watched Hunger recently, though,
and then
right?
and then actually in preparation for this podcast, I felt like I should know. There's not actually that much Steve McQueen, really.
No, it's
when you look
it's
at
Hunger, Shame, 12 Years a Slave. Widows, and then Small Axe.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of shorts in there.
Yeah.
It's actually not a huge filmography.
No.
So I was like, I need to at least see some of his work he did with Michael Fassbender.
Well, and so you watched Hunger, and that's a way artier movie, I would say.
It's
maybe I'm wrong.
Well,
I haven't watched it it's been like 8 years.
You're right. Hunger is not as concerned with, I think, making sure it's telling you the history.
Right.
I think it's working off the assumption, unlike Small Axe,
right,
that a lot of people watching this will know the history.
Yeah.
Because it was, I didn't know the history of Hunger either. I had to look that up. But I do know that being released in the UK, that's a much more popular story.
Yeah.
About
hunger strikes
in Ireland. Yeah. In Northern Ireland. And Hunger was amazing. But what I really was struck by, because this is, really his, I believe it was his first feature.
Yeah.
I was really struck by, right out of the gate, how incredibly tight it feels as far as this is a Steve McQueen film. All these touches that I've noticed in Steve McQueen in what I've seen, throughout the years, you can draw a line straight through them back to Hunger. There are just Steve McQueen touches that he puts in all of his movies that, first of all, let you know this is a Steve McQueen movie and he knows what he's doing and you're in good hands.
Yes.
But second of all, this is an auteur. And the reason I say this is because some of those decisions are decisions that you have to be really confident they're going to work for them to work, and they work. And they work amazingly. There's a Steve McQueen thing that I don't think I can name another director that does it like him. I don't even know what to call it. I guess I would just call it the linger. He just takes a moment and he will make you sit with it for longer than you normally would.
Right.
To the point where you have to sort of settle in with it, meditate on it even a little bit, and it pulls you in closer to say, what's really going on here?
Yeah.
And you see it in every single Small Axe movie. I went through each one, and every time there was one in my notes, I wrote it down.
So should we start with Mangrove? Should we get into it a little bit?
Yeah, let's get into it, yeah.
What's the moment in Mangrove? That's the linger.
So there's a couple, but the main one is that colander shot in the kitchen.
Yes. Yeah.
The colander. That's it. That's the Steve McQueen magic right there.
So if you have or haven't seen Mangrove, this is after a police raid, and it's always chaotic scenes.
Yeah, that's another McQueen thing in every movie. The chaos is real,
yes,
and brutal and just visceral.
Yes,
yeah,
and that makes this certain shot of the colander all the more striking because we just had the police come through and brutalize and raid everybody in this place, and in the meantime, a colander had gotten knocked off one of the tables in the kitchen. And would have been a detail that nobody noticed, but McQueen puts the camera on the floor and we just watch the colander rock back and forth.
As the police have gone up the stairs behind it, and you still hear the ruckus. You hear the doors slamming, the yelling, but it's far off at this point in the distance, and you are just watching this colander. The physics of it, it's slowing down. You know, his movies have a very assured and consistent pacing to them in the editing. And these shots, they just kind of jolt you because it just sits with you for a while.
Right.
And it rubs against the pace of the movie as you've been going through it so far.
Because he never really does a ton of quick editing or anything. And it almost increases the pace retroactively of what you'd just seen and then what follows.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you rest, really. Like, these are not moments to breathe. They're kind of moments to hold your breath.
Yeah. And I feel like they're doing semi-different things depending on which one you're looking at. In that lingering shot, I think what I felt like it was doing was it was reminding you that you're kind of just a bystander here.
Right.
The camera is not going to follow the action. The action is moving elsewhere, but the action is still there. And you're actually, what you're watching is the after effect.
And those touches they're indicative of his total control over the emotion of every scene he shoots. And so because he has that control, he can show you different things even back to back or even within the same scene that doesn't disrupt the movie in a way that is jarring or distracting, but you feel all of it because he wants you to feel it in that moment. And in Mangrove especially, he sets up what is so powerful about Lover's Rock, which is just the scenes of joy and togetherness. And where in Lover's Rock, he lets those moments linger and the whole movie essentially is joy and togetherness. In Mangrove, he uses those moments of joy to highlight how intrusive the invasion of the police is.
Right.
You feel the chaos as strongly as you felt the joy. And so he uses his control over both types of emotion to heighten each of them. And he does that throughout. And then especially in the courtroom scenes, he's able to have that control over, you feel the injustice of the system and you feel the strength of the powerful moments of the people who were serving as their own counsel and like the satisfying kind of testimony.
The movie kind of works in two parts. You know, the beginning really is setting you up of like, this was what the Mangrove restaurant was. This was what it meant to the community. And then the movie really kind of becomes a courtroom drama.
Yeah.
And it's great courtroom drama.
It's amazing.
It's a really well done, well executed courtroom drama.
Yeah.
But also having two of them represent themselves, the gesture of that in itself speaks volumes, but also it just makes for great drama to actually hear the people who are being accused of these things be able to get up and speak as themselves.
Question the people who arrested them.
And the tactic of upending some of that tradition, and because that tradition is whiteness in this country. You know?
The tradition is oppression.
Yes.
Right. And so knowing when and how to upend that and cause that tension.
I would like to know, PC Pulley, how it is possible that even two men could look through this same hole at the same time.
Quiet at once. It's possible if they both looked through one eye.
So, where was your face, PC Pulley? Next to PC Rice or next to PC Dixon? Eh? Was it like this? Or like this? Where was your face, Pulley?
My lord, please direct Mr. Howe to address the witness correctly.
Constable Pulley, you know why you are now being ridiculed? The image of 4 police officers behaving in such a manner is worthy of ridicule, is it not? It could make a stuffed bird laugh. Could make a stuffed bird laugh. PC Pulley, I suggest that substantial and important parts of your evidence are deliberate lies. Deliberate and conspiratorial lies designed to have my freedom taken away from me.
I think because it's such a good courtroom drama, Mangrove is probably the most movie-ish of all of the Small Axe movies. One, it's a very good hook to the series because it doesn't throw necessarily new stuff at you as far as a movie-going experience, but it does what it does tremendously well. It shows the human side and the human toll, the toll that this is taking on all the defendants. As strong as they are, and we kind of talked about this with time, as extraordinary as these people are, it can't not break them down. And showing how, despite that, they're able to rally and genuinely beat the system through their tenacity, through their cleverness, their knowledge of law, their knowledge of science, like everything at their disposal.
And I love that it's a mix of people like Frank Critchlow, who's kind of the I would say kind of like closest thing to the main character in this as the restaurant owner of the Mangrove, played amazingly by Sean Parks, especially when they read the verdict. My God, his performance as they read that verdict. But he only got into this begrudgingly. He wanted to have a restaurant. He just wanted to have a place for the community.
Well, he never meant to be an activist.
Right. Exactly.
He wasn't making a point. He just wanted a place for the community.
But then you've got the activists in there. You've got the Black Panthers, and you've got Althea Jones, played by Letitia Wright.
Right, like Darkest Howe, played by Malachi Kirby.
Yeah.
And a couple people who aren't business owners like Frank and aren't activists at all. Like they're kind of people that could be liabilities as a part of their own defense, because they're not, they're younger. They would be easily stereotyped, but they end up playing a part in the defense. And that's one of the other amazing things about this. This is like Frank is the main character, you would say. Darkus and Barbara, his wife, and Althea are the kind of the secondary characters. And the rest of the 9 aren't main characters. Their names aren't even coming to me, but they do play their part in it. Like one of them, in a statement he makes to the court, just briefly and kind of off the cuff, really is a powerful moment. And another one of them, as he is testifying, is another pivotal moment. Like he finds a way to bring all of them together in this. Yeah. And the reason it is so vital to Lover's Rock is because this is a movie that just shows how the racist police, and then the court system as well, saw no place for Black community. The police couldn't stand to see it, and the court couldn't stand to protect it.
By the way, a Black community that was asked to be there.
Yes.
Historically.
Right. That's the other thing. Kelsey looked that up because one of the characters had said they invited us here. Yeah. And it was after World War II in the 50s where they needed more hospital workers. They needed
postal workers and transportation drivers.
And people in the West Indies were British citizens or citizens of the Commonwealth or whatever. And they invited, was it like 500,000?
I don't know the exact number. I just know that that's why there were so many West Indian immigrants at this time.
Yeah, and especially in London. And then, not respected, not given rights, not allowed to just have a community.
Right. And then also, like the government wanted them to come for these jobs, but then a lot of these jobs wouldn't actually hire them once they got there.
Yeah.
On top of like other private businesses that didn't want their business, shut them out, and they had to,
And then when they own their own business, the police can't stand that either. So then Lover's Rock, as a second episode, is so beautiful because it is one night, one house party. They were called what kind of
blues parties?
Blues parties.
Yeah, and also historically, I don't even think McQueen talked about this, but the reason they had these blues parties was because Black people were not welcomed into the actual clubs and discotheques in the UK.
Yeah,
so this was the only way they really had to party.
And some of the strongest connection between episodes, I think, is in Lover's Rock, the kitchen scene, and Mangrove, where there are women cooking in the kitchen, getting ready to serve food at this party, to sell food at this blues party. And it's reminiscent of in Mangrove. I don't know if they were in the kitchen, but they do kind of sing a song, like a Caribbean song. Also, just there are some of a few scenes that take place in the kitchen in Mangrove. And so it's almost like you can draw the connection between the police and British society wouldn't let us have an official establishment. So through their resilience, they find a way to cook their food and sell their food to each other and dance together and sing together.
To actually let's just throw the furniture out of our house so we can charge some money and basically just turn this house into a club for the weekend.
Yeah. So it's not quite real time, but it takes its time just being at this party. We get to know a few people. We don't know why we're getting to know them or anything. They're just people to get to know. One of them was kind of modeled on Steve McQueen's aunt, who would sneak out of the house to go to blues parties. But what struck me about Lovers Rock is this is just Black people celebrating each other and protecting each other and creating a culture and a community apart from the oppressive culture. And the only white people in this movie are some menacing people on the outside peripheries of this neighborhood. And so, seen on its own, Lovers Rock is just one long dance sequence after another. But then after Mangrove, it's like those scenes, to spend time in them is such a breath of fresh air, because where we had dance and singing broken up by the police in Mangrove, that just never comes in Lovers Rock.
In fact, you don't really even know when that party ends.
Right.
There's never an ending point.
We just follow two people out.
We just follow two people out as the daybreak is happening.
And one of the things that I love about Lovers Rock is just the small ways people look out for each other. Early in the movie, there are two women, Martha and Patty, who come to this party. They don't live in the house that the party's at. And then there are two other young women who do live in the house. And they don't know each other, but they judge each other. Like, they see each other and they kind of like, who are they? Like, you know, but then we've got that moment near the end where Martha, who doesn't know Cynthia and only kind of made threatening eyes at each other, you know, judgmental eyes at each other, sees her being assaulted and goes and stops the guy.
Really risks her life.
She does. And when she says, "Come stand by me, sis," like that is the most powerful moment for me in that movie, because she doesn't know this girl, but she knows that they need each other. And she says, "Come stand by me, sis."
And it's not even like they become friends for life or anything.
Right.
They just kind of move on with their night.
And the other moment that really I found beautiful in that way of another person kind of looking out for another person is when Martha's cousin, CT, comes to the party, and he's maybe drunk or on something, but he's clearly not in a good condition, and he's dancing really weirdly and really like physically. Nobody's being mean to him, but nobody's comfortable with him there. And one of the DJs just goes over to him, offers him a joint, and then brings him over and hands him the mic. And almost said, like, looking out for everybody else there, like, he's not going to dance by you anymore, but we're not going to kick this guy out. We're not going to put him on the margins. He's going to come over here, and he's going to be a part of this. And not everybody was cool with it exactly at first, but then they just kind of like accept him. And he's not like great. He's not like, whoa, this guy's an amazing MC or anything. But they just saw what he needed and they gave it to him.
Yeah.
And the way that this is about the larger community, but also the individual connections that people make, it's just remarkable how he's able to be so genuine in all of the emotions that are coming through in Lovers Rock.
Yeah. I totally agree. And there is so much that's just authentic to me about Lovers Rock, even though this is a culture and a time period even that I really don't know a whole lot about. I could just tell it was authentic, and I could tell because there was something universal about this movie. It took me back to my days going to punk rock shows that were in like basements or in not necessarily maybe even in a house, but they're like at a civic center or something like that.
A bowling alley basement or something.
And the way that the progression of this movie, the movie doesn't really have a plot, but it certainly has a progression to it.
Right.
And the progression, I think, is the natural progression of any type of like low-key concert or party you've ever been to, where it kind of starts out with people, you know, they're kind of at the couple people. There's not that many people there. They're kind of hanging out on the outskirts of the room. A few people in the middle. It's like couples that are just kind of starting to break the ice a little bit. and the music starts getting going, and it just takes one or two good songs. That's all it takes, and everybody just loosens up.
Yep.
That's what it takes.
Yeah.
It's the music that just loosens everybody up, and then it just goes, and it just turns into this beautiful thing. We should definitely break down the silly games scene.
Oh, man.
But before we talk about that, it's just that progression of like, then people start kind of going outside and just taking a chill.
And
go
then
to the
there becomes a
bathroom,
natural rhythm to the night where,
And then people start kind of coupling off and the couples maybe leave. And I noticed by the end, it's very dude heavy.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot of guys.
Yeah.
Gets a little bit more aggressive.
But what a great moment
It's
that is,
amazing.
too.
It's not bad. It's not like toxic.
No.
It's just beautiful, like energy. It's energy.
Have you ever seen like a more pure depiction of what would be potentially stereotypical masculinity?
Yeah, it was amazing. And the song they play to it, which is by the Revolutionaries, it's Kunta Kinte dub. It's just got like this break to it. And you feel that frenetic energy as soon as that beat drops and that bass line kicks in. And they actually do it a couple times.
They go back and play it. They do it a couple
again.
times in the party where they play the song over again. It also serves as a really cool snapshot of early hip hop history.
Yeah, with the MC.
How that started. It was all about the music and not about the vocalist, but you also got what he added to it, like the energy that is sustained by that.
Yeah.
That was a really cool element of it without leaning on it too heavily. Not like, this movie is not there to educate people who don't know.
No. But it does make you want to be educated about it. I did a lot of looking into lovers rock. I didn't even know lovers rock was a genre.
I didn't either.
I had no idea what that was talking about.
I didn't either.
Yeah. I mean, I've been really just getting into it.
So, this is and this is interesting too, because we watched lovers rock without watching anything else. And Kelsey was like, is this all going to be reggae? Because I don't love reggae.
We've talked about reggae.
We talked about reggae.
Yeah.
I totally got into Jimmy Cliff this summer, but rewatching Mangrove, Lovers Rock, Alex Wheatle
for sure.
By the end, Kelsey said, and I was going to say it myself. She's like, I think I like reggae now.
It frames it for you.
Yeah.
Because it gives you something to picture now. I needed context.
Yeah.
One of the things I love so much about Lovers Rock in particular is McQueen's ability to somehow capture every type of texture.
Right.
And to me, now I have that to latch onto reggae. Now, if I hear reggae, I'm thinking like, I'm going back to like that, just people joyfully dancing in Lovers Rock. And you needed someone like McQueen to be able to paint that fully, because the texture you get in here, I mean, I feel like you can feel the polyester on their clothes.
Yes.
You can feel the heat. You can feel
there's the scene where you see the water dripping down the wall.
the steam off the walls.
A sweaty room.
You feel the dinginess of the bathroom. The smell of weed, the reddish black hazy kind of lighting.
Yeah.
And what I'm describing doesn't sound like it, but somehow that's so romantic. The movie just does this incredible job.
Yeah.
The movie, and of course the people in the movie.
The performers.
Which I think maybe this would be a good time to talk about.
I mean, that scene,
silly games scene.
I don't know if Lovers Rock is my favorite movie of the 5, but I do know that the silly game scene is my favorite scene in the whole anthology.
No, I've got no time to play your silly
They play this song, it plays through its entirety, and people are just dancing, and then everybody in the place sings it again, a cappella. And then they just riff on the chorus, Silly Games. And I don't even know how to describe it. It like starts as a collective thing. We're all experiencing this, but then it transforms into almost a chant where it's meditative and worshipful everybody is there together, but everybody is experiencing this moment on their own.
That's exactly what I thought too, is that there was this communal aspect to it, but yet everybody seems to be so into their own world.
Would you turn me away? You're as much to blame. 'Cause I know you're
So much of this, what makes this work also, is the actual song choice.
Right, of course.
Of course. And this, this is Janet Kay's silly game, so you've got that high-pitched note that no one's going to hit, except for one does.
One woman there is doing it.
She's doing
and
it.
she loves that she's doing it. But then she abandons it. And like that's part of what the shift in the whole thing is that there's not that high note really once they start kind of the drone
Right.
of it.
But even before the music cuts out, I feel like the song choice, the way that really is the moment where Martha and Franklin are, I think, really... This when he's got like his hand all over her butt. And
Right.
it is just like a really sexy...
They're really grinding.
Sexy doesn't do it justice. Because
No,
I
it's-
feel
yeah.
like it's better than that. Like
Yeah. It's as spiritually erotic as it can be.
Exactly. There's something about that
Although
song.
erotic cheapens it.
There's a sweetness to that sexiness and that eroticism.
Yeah. And you're right. The song choice is vital. But then once the song goes into the hands of the people,
Yeah.
they make it their own song as a group. And then each person makes it their own song
Mm-hmm.
as they're singing it. And McQueen just lets it go until it becomes your own song.
Yes.
And every person... I guess I can only speak for myself. And it seems like you, and I think Kelsey, while she was watching it, you enter into your own headspace with the song. It's some of the most magical filmmaking I've seen.
I mean, it has to be, for me, musical moments in film. It's got to be an all-time favorite. Mm-hmm. It's got to be up there in the conversation. Even with every single musical I've ever seen, every dance number I've ever seen on film, this is just, it's got to be there. And it's unlike anything else.
And I use the word worshipful intentionally. I don't think that I have ever, like outside of spiritual experiences, seen something like that.
There's just so much going on in that scene. I think we could do an entire episode probably on that entire scene.
Probably, yeah. We could really dissect it. But I think we should move on to Red, White, and Blue. But the transition, there is a moment in that movie. The movie is still very much a part of Small Acts when Franklin takes Martha to his work to listen to more music, to make out a little bit. And then his boss, who's a white man, comes in. And he's not awful. But he definitely lets Franklin know that he's not in control here.
Mm-hmm. And Franklin has to sort of assume the part.
Yeah.
Right away.
And so as much as this movie is about the celebration, it's also grounded in that reality of this was a tenuous, fragile bubble that it was able to be created by this community. And it's... The thing is, he doesn't lean heavily enough on it to break the spell of the movie.
Right.
It doesn't ruin it, doesn't bring it all down, but it is a reality check that, again, like the police breaking in, heightens the joy that we just saw and makes us long for it and appreciate it even more. And then the fact that Martha can go home and lay in bed smiling uncontrollably shows that didn't get her down.
Right.
Like that wasn't enough to take away what that night meant to her.
It's a great ending. And, it's funny you say spell, because I know McQueen, part of what he saw this as was a fairy tale. And this was Cinderella coming back after the ball.
And yeah, there's more we could talk about, like who's the man with the cross and like
there is.
What does that mean? There's a whole lot, but we do need to keep moving on here.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
And the joy of Lover's Rock is just brought crashing down to earth.
In Red, White, and Blue.
With Red, White, and Blue, which is, I think, for me, easily the hardest of the five to watch because of how raw the racism is here and how raw the effect is on Leroy, all of which is heightened by John Boyega's unbelievable performance.
It is amazing. Yeah.
I mean, he is a star. Like, John Boyega is a star.
Outside of Star Wars, had you seen him in anything else?
I saw him in Attack the Block. So Attack the Block was the first time I saw him. But outside of Star Wars, I don't know that I have seen him in something other than Attack the Block and this. And so, while the racism of Red, White, and Blue makes it, for me, the hardest to watch, this was the one where I was watching it and I just said to myself that Steve McQueen can do so much so well.
Mm-hmm.
He did so many different things from Mangrove to Lover's Rock, but like I said, he was doing some comparable things as well. And Red, White, and Blue is where he does absolutely nothing the same as he did in the other two.
Yeah.
He was so good in Mangrove and Lover's Rock in showing the collective emotion. And Red, White, and Blue is such a singular movie.
It's an isolating movie.
Yeah.
For sure.
And to be able to, again, it's just his ability to control the tone and the emotion. So, was there anything different watching Red, White, and Blue again? Because I think that there are some things to watching it the first time that you aren't sure where the story is going to go, even though you kind of know it.
And here's the thing. So this is the story of Leroy Logan. Leroy Logan actually did stay on the force.
I'm sure he did.
And he did end up becoming like the head of the Black Police Association. And I saw like photos of him with like Princess Diana, you know, so like he did eventually rise the ranks isn't the right way to put it, but like he did eventually end up becoming a notable figure within the police force in the UK.
Right.
The movie, I think, smartly just doesn't take you there because it would be too happy of an ending and it would kind of undercut, I think, the real toil and struggle of someone trying to do this. You know, I think McQueen is hesitant to say this is a success story.
Right.
And that's why he has to end it where he ends it. And boy, does he end it in a place that... And that, to me, is where watching it the second time made it better. Because the first time, I didn't know where it was going. Mm-hmm. And then, even my first time watching it, I got to that final scene with him and his dad at that table talking about change.
Yeah.
My mother, boy. You know, I find the world, it just move forward. Always do. A big change. That is a slow turning wheel. Sometimes I think the earth needs to be scorched. Replanted. So something good will come of it. Something good.
As powerful as the other two movies are, for their own ways, that one just left me quiet.
Yep. It's extremely sobering.
Yes. And so the second time watching it, knowing that's where it was going, I was able to kind of just hang with it and see how everything kind of builds up to that ending. I think the first time you watch it, you keep thinking, well, there's going to be some kind of redemption somewhere in this.
He's going to find an ally.
There's going to be somebody, yeah. Or even like, it's weird because I feel like in that scene at the end, there is a restoration of the father-son relationship in a reckoning with each other in where they're at.
Yeah.
And in also both of them realizing sort of the futility of both their positions.
But you're right that relationship between Leroy and his father isn't strictly oppositional the whole time. There is movement towards each other throughout. And the scene in this movie that floored me, and again was one of the ways that I just was like, McQueen, he's so versatile, is the scene where his dad tells him he's going to drop him off at like cadet training or whatever that's called.
Yes, yeah.
And it's wordless, and you never see their faces, certainly close up. But the realism and the genuine emotion that comes from his dad dropping him off, him getting out without saying anything, and his dad getting out, and we don't hear it, but they hug.
Yeah.
And it's just like so powerful in a way that I've never seen a movie draw that sort of emotion. There's no close-ups. There's no speeches. There's body language. So the performances certainly are a part of this. But again, the vision to show that scene in that way and that small reconciliation that says this isn't fixed.
Right. The dad still feels betrayed.
Yes.
But he's recognizing that he's still his father nonetheless. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that relationship is still strained.
Even at the end.
Yeah.
but they also realize that they're both looking at the same thing, and they're starting to see each other's perspective, even if they aren't fully there. There's a poem by a poet named Roscoe Burnhams. He talks about how his mother has faith and he doesn't. But when he saw his mother go through cancer and the doctors said, like, she won't live, he drew upon his mother's faith. And there's a line where he says something like, I've seen too much to believe in God, and she's made it to the other side too often to not believe in him. And it feels to me that that's the connection that he and his dad have. Like, his dad's looking at it and he's like, you can't trust it. And he's looking at it and he said, I can't leave it alone. And so this is, I don't know, next to Mangrove, is this the most straightforward movie?
I think so, because, and we'll get to Alex Wheatle and Education, but, well, at the very least, they feel much smaller. And this one does seem to, it feels more like a complete movie on its own.
And it does. Like, you could watch this one on its own and still be kind of floored by it. But I think if you saw only this one and its ending, you'd leave pretty devastated.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it didn't end how I thought it would, given who Leroy was as we met him. But then, given the series' willingness to be realistic, it ended exactly
how it should have.
What
were you picturing?
I guess I just pictured, he's such a strong, positive person. I figured there'd be some movement, for him.
Right.
But I think as a pivot point for the series, or a break as the dead center of the series, it's a really effective choice. Of the five, couldn't be more different from Lover's Rock.
Well, yeah, for sure.
But then to follow it with Alex Wheatle, who is basically the opposite of Leroy Logan.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
In a lot of ways. Somebody who started, as a youth, like with youthful exuberance, but a pretty cynical and worldly youth who becomes idealistic, sort of. Finds hope.
Right. And finds it in
prison from a fellow prisoner.
Well, and that's, what I was writing down is if you look at the progression of small acts, you've got Mangrove, which is sort of like laying the context of these communities, but also the sort of unjust justice system.
Right.
Talking about then in Lover's Rock, how they have to sort of build this community and find joy in themselves. Follow that by the police brutality and the injustice of the policing system in the UK and the racism within that. And you're going straight from the police perspective to incarceration, to prison. So there is sort of like this even within Alex Wheatle, there's sort of a logical flow.
But its own kind of left turn after Red, White, and Blue. Like, on the face of it, none of the movies follow each other. He does his best to disrupt what you just saw, and almost invites you to expect a more cut and dried story of a troubled youth in prison. But then this is probably the most playful of the movies.
I think so. Eventually, yeah. Once it gets there.
Right, yeah. Once it gets there. Like, I'm thinking of when they try to go to the concert and they tell them they have money, and then they need money, and then it just cuts to them sitting on the couch. Like, just, like, you don't see them walking home or being disappointed. It's just, boop, they're on the couch.
Right.
They did not get into that show.
Yeah, they got to start their crucial rocker.
Right. Yeah, and this one, I feel like, goes to great lengths to not get to know the police at all.
Right, that's true.
We knew PC Pulley. We knew a couple of the police from Mangrove. We definitely knew, obviously, Leroy and other police officers in Red, White, and Blue. And then this one, the police are a presence, but they are a nuisance.
They're called the Beast.
Right,
in this movie.
Yeah.
And I like how they call it, like, the whole system's called Babylon. It's like Babylon and the Beast. You know? And this was the one for me that was like, man, you had to watch this with the subtitles.
Absolutely.
There was no way I was going to get this movie without the closed captioning on it. Yeah. This was also, as far as playful goes, this was the movie I first realized there's a lot of Star Wars in this series. Like, all throughout. Even in Red, White, and Blue, they mention Jedis
right.
in it.
Which is funny
in its own inside way. And then in this one, they talk about walking more like a Jedi than a stormtrooper.
Right.
And then there's a part like when he's hanging out at the guy's house with his family and the two kids are kind of having a little lightsaber fight.
Oh, that's right.
There's just sort of a constant reminder that Star Wars was definitely like a part of this early to mid 80s, apparently even in Britain, not just in America.
Right, yeah. So Alex Wheatle, I think, tended to be the one that people reviewed less highly.
Yeah, I mean, none of them were like panned, but it was definitely kind of like the one that's like, okay, it's all right. Let's see how they wrap it up next. Like, they're kind of like, on to the next, please, you know.
Which could be because of the strength of the first three.
Yeah.
But I really liked Alex Wheatle. And if it were its own thing, I think it would still be very powerful. And it might have its most compatible kind of spiritual connection to Mangrove. It's not fully following all of the beats of Mangrove because there's definitely the very rough beginning, but then the community formed on the streets through the music, but not in the clubs. Like, this is a smaller form community, a more like artisanal community, right? Like where it's him and Dennis and Badger form kind of that drug community, but then him and his other friend with Crucial Rocker, and the people in the hostel. Like there's smaller pockets within the larger community of Brixton,
right? And again, the music is kind of what glues so much of this together. And I love in Alex Wheatle just that genuine passion for the music that he has, and that whole record store community, and you know. Kind of an interesting, talking about playful, even cinematically, there was that really interesting shot of like, it looked like the center of a record, and then it spun, and then that's how it did a cut transition in there. Just kind of a little like fun way to just move the movie along.
But then not only that, but the scene, the first time they go into the record store, where it's a single camera shot where we see Alex and then the camera pans, and then the next time we see Alex, it's 6 months later in the same record store. This is the most kind of flashy filmmaking.
Yeah, yep.
But another thing, so this movie was a major education in the firebombing of the house or apartment complex in Brixton where 13 people died. The government kind of turned its back on the case, and nobody, I don't think it was ever solved, or nobody was ever convicted of anything. And so there were riots in Brixton.
And the way that's depicted through poetry.
Yes, and that was, it was so incredible.
Just stills, black and white stills.
Could have white, them implied could have black, who responds for the attack against those innocent young blacks. Instead of raising the alarm, make the public know what go on. Plenty paper print pure lie for blind your public eye. And the police them plot and scheme, confuse and conceal. Me hear say even the poor parents of the dead them try to use. But you know, in spite of them wicked propaganda, we refuse to surrender to them ugly innuendo. For up till now, not one of them, neither Stockwell, neither Wilson nor Bell, not one of them can tell we why. Not one of them can tell we who. Who turned that night of joy into a morning of sorrow? Who turned the jollity into an ugly tragedy?
It was this sequence where the poet is speaking and writing in the dialect. And in some of the still images, you saw their signs, their protest signs were written in dialect. And it was that scene that made for the whole anthology the importance, the power of the dialect, not just as an identity for the community, but as a form of resistance, as a form of power. And then it made me think back to Mangrove when Darkus and Althea are speaking in dialect in court, not trying to use the standard written English. And the power that is in that, not only in them upholding their identities in the face of the court or in the face of the police at the riot or the protest, but also just in their effectiveness. Because I just will always remember Althea's moment where she asks a question of the medical examiner. and she says like, "Oh gosh," and like the way she the fact that it's being said in the West Indian dialect is part of its power, because so often, and we saw it in Red, White, and Blue, dialect or accents are seen as weakness, are seen as stupidity, are seen as an inability. We see it in education as substandard, but in the Brixton riots, in Alex Wheatle generally, as Alex adopts that dialect, it's not natural for him, but he finds his identity in it. And then in the courtroom scenes, it's such a powerful addition to their voice.
Yeah.
And that, it didn't hit me until that sequence of the poetry in Alex Wheatle.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, you know, you also get that with the sort of mentorship and wisdom he gains from his cellmate as well. At this point in the movie, he's picked up a lot of the, like you said, the dialect and the culture and the music and the community of it, but he's still got that piece missing, which is the history of it. It's not till he meets that cellmate that really illuminates him to the importance of knowing your history. And you're going to get a little bit of that later in education, but in Alex Wheatle is where I think it lays the groundwork of the importance of that education. And what I love about the way it's done in Alex Wheatle is there's a symmetry to the movie. The movie opens with a narrative of, you don't know who it is, but someone is reading off records. And then the symmetry of it is that's how it ends.
Yeah.
Is him reading his own record. And I love that what makes him decide to pull out his own records and figure out his history is this cellmate telling him the importance of knowing your history, but that history is not just your own personal history, it's your family history, it's world history, it's all of it. Like, you need to know history entirely.
But before that, he tells Alex to tell him his story.
That's true, yeah.
That history doesn't have any importance to you if you don't know your story and your place within it. And I think that that's a really fascinating, empowering, humanizing, dignifying way to look at everybody, but then especially troubled youth, incarcerated people. Say, like, what is your story? Because we're so quick to put a story on people like that and put them in a box and tell ourselves their story. And then, yes, after he has heard Alex's story, he tells him the history of his people.
Yeah.
And the line, you know,
if you don't know your past, then you won't know your future. What he gives him is the Black Jacobins.
Right. Which was in Mangrove.
Yeah, right. And what I feel like is if you can watch them in consecutive order and you get that little piece of Alex Wheatle, you take that going into education.
Yeah.
And you've already sort of established the importance of knowing where you came from, knowing who you are. And you throw in a child into a school system that doesn't give a shit about where you came from or who you are and is never going to help educate you about who you are. I think if you watch these in order, you immediately have a sympathy with this child that you maybe wouldn't have if you just got dropped into this movie.
Right.
You know, you immediately understand that, like, yeah, this child's acting out. That doesn't make him a bad child because, you know, we know from everything we've seen from Mangrove up till now, this child is in a system that is set up to make him fail. And any support he gets is not going to come from that school system.
Right. And before that, we would say has theoretically or has essentially set him up to fail. And then the movie says, like, and here is how it is literally setting him up to fail.
Yeah, right.
Right? Within this system. And I got to say, I don't know if education's the best one or anything, but as a teacher in a predominantly white school, the school whose black students during remote learning especially are being failed by the system, this was one of the most affecting of the 5 for me to watch. It was the only one that I cried at.
Oh, I cried twice.
And certainly the only one I cried throughout, multiple times.
I think I'm sure this hits you differently as a teacher, but I can say even as someone who's not a teacher, to me, and I can't say why it is, but it was the most just emotional for me. Watch.
Well, I mean, it's happening to a child. It's part of it.
Yeah.
It's partly why the beginning of Alex Wheatle is so difficult to watch.
Well, you know, and the Red, White, and Blue starts with a child too.
That's true.
So, you know, I think it's not something that's new to education, but education is basically like, we're going to dive into this.
It's interesting how by the time education has come around, and again, maybe education on its own would have flaws, or would it be perceived to have flaws, would we believe just the cruelty of that teacher if we hadn't already seen 4 movies where we can say, look, everywhere this community goes, they are met with this.
And there is a part of me that doesn't want to take away any of the racism from that, but I immediately went to Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, where I was like, this is also part of just the British education system
style.
in this time. I don't know if it's the same now.
Could be, but
still, you're right, because obviously the other children in there are at a different level than he is, and that's the only thing the teacher provides is an insult, and we move on.
What I found so remarkable about this movie, this segment, is the mother character played by Charlene White and her arc. Analyzing her a little bit, to be embarrassed that her son is not doing well in school, embarrassed and defensive, which she takes out on him. And also, in that attempt to assimilate and to succeed in school, trusts the institution to be correct and her son to be incorrect.
Right.
And then to watch her through the intervention and help of essentially a political activist, Lydia, played by Josette Simon, who tells her the history, she starts to see how the system was failing her son and that she had bought into it. And to watch her movement, then the town hall meeting, where I think the moment that for me as an educator, I would show this to anybody in the school system, is the mother who describes the resentment she has for her child.
I feel nothing but let down by the system. And not just the school system, this whole blasted country system. I came here with a dream for my family. And I'm ashamed to admit it. But when my children bring it home, I find myself hating them for it. My own children. And that just make me hate this place all the more. I don't have no dream to pass on.
And the way that hatred, that self-hatred and then the hatred for each other foments within a household and divides a house and divides a community.
Yeah.
Not only doing the damage of not providing an adequate education, but doing the damage of, on top of an inadequate education, dividing and creating enemies and enmity within the community. And that was so tremendously articulated in that scene. And the shame that is developed, the shame that's put upon people as they're failed by the system, was remarkable. Like, I've never seen a movie put that to words.
Yeah.
All culminated in the scene where she tenderly and so beautifully portrayed by Charlene White, not accusingly, not anything but tenderly, asks Kingsley to read. Yeah. And the way he breaks down and the way his sister, I'm like tearing up thinking about it now.
Me too. Yeah. I've seen this twice now, and every time I break down.
Some of the most powerful treatise on education systems I've ever seen. It's just unbelievable that not only this singular movie can do it, but the way that the whole series leads up to this moment and really is creating its thesis along the way that, like, this doesn't just happen to adults. It doesn't just happen to communities. It happens to children who are effectively targeted.
And don't understand what's being done to them. I mean, he understands the whole time that is
smarter than this school.
Yes.
And is being...
And he also understands that he's not really going to a real school. He gets this,
right.
But he doesn't see the larger picture that Small Axe really has been painting the whole time.
Right.
That mother character is fascinating also because in a simpler movie, The mother would have just been made out to be a villain.
Yeah. And the father.
And the father. Because to get you to a point where she, as a mother, is making him cry because she's being mean to him, like just being cruel and calling him nothing but a heap of trouble.
Yeah.
Multiple times. And to get you to a place where that same mother, and it's not really a progression of her love. Her love was always there.
Yep.
She was exhausted because she was working night shifts as a nurse and still having to clean up a house.
Right.
But you never doubted necessarily her love for her children. She still had breakfast out on the table, told them to eat their breakfast before they left. She was just, a working mom doing the best she could.
Who was at the end of her rope sometimes.
At the end of her rope sometimes, and also just assumed the school is the caretaker of my child. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't have to worry about that part. My kid's acting up. What's wrong with my kid? But to take that character and make it someone that you don't feel like they're a new character in that moment.
Right.
Where she's tenderly having her child try to read in front of her. But she's just someone who has been illuminated.
Right.
And the love takes a different shape once that happens. Mm-hmm. And you also have the sister character in that room.
Right.
Who is this whole time been trying to protect her brother. She helps her brother hide the fact that he can't read. And in her own way, that's a way of being a good older
protector,
sister, a protector. And so it becomes not just a mother-son moment, it becomes a family moment in that as well.
Right.
And then also the dad, when she confronts him, he could be a villain as well.
Yeah.
He keeps just saying, we just got to get him into a trade. So he's also been resigned to the fact that his child maybe he is subnormal, but that's okay. We'll get him into a trade.
He doesn't need to read to do this because...
Look at me.
I can't read and I'm doing fine. Yeah. The simple, efficient way that he gives backstory to characters that you understand them completely is amazing. And this is the shortest of the movies. And it's also the one with some of the biggest transformations in character.
True. Yeah.
It's just a feat of storytelling in that way.
Mm-hmm. And there are choices in this that are kind of odd on their surface, where I'm like, why is this working?
Mm-hmm.
When you've got the teacher playing House of the Rising Sun.
Holy cow, that's so friggin' funny.
It's hilarious.
And awful. Well,
what filmmaker thinks that would work? But it does.
It does. But it's those ways that he connects the movies, because we were allowed to join in on silly games for its entirety. And then we are forced to sit through House of the Rising Sun played terribly, but very earnestly the whole way through, including 3 repetitions of one verse.
It goes on. And in a movie that is short, and you would think, we don't got the time to do this.
We got to cut this out, yeah.
It goes on forever. And I don't know how McQueen got all the perfect reactions from those students at the same time. How that
Maybe they just were genuinely bored.
How that teacher could do that with a straight face and actually play, because he's playing that, actually perform that so moderately terrible.
Believably terrible. Just well enough that somebody would be confident, a white man would be confident to perform it in front of other people. And we need to talk about that house school.
Right. I am Mrs. Bartholomew, but you can call me Tabitha. Now, I can promise you both, you have never been to a school anything like mine.
60.
72.
84.
96.
108.
120.
132.
144.
It's a draw. You are both excellent at your times tables. Good for you.
I know my 13s. Do you know 13s?
Yes, 13.
26.
36.
No, 39. Ha, I win. 39, 52, 65.
But times tables only goes up to 12. Isn't it, Mrs. Bartholomew?
No, it don't. It goes all the way up to 20.
Actually, Buzz, thank you. It goes up and up and up and just keeps going until only the finest brains in the land can keep up.
Like a rocket out of our solar system. All the way to infinity.
Now there's a clever young man. Eh? To infinity. Imagine that. I'm very impressed, Kingsley. And Ashley.
And I don't want to get too technical, but culturally relevant teaching is a big thing that people are talking about now. And what was happening in that moment is like as purely relevant pedagogical theory as you could get. students learning from each other and learning in realistic situations and being praised and being allowed to bring their interests and bring their strengths. And when she tells the sister to come to school, the sister thinks, I can read, I'm good, I don't need to be here. But then she invites her in to have breakfast, and she is able to read and like teach the other students. Like, that was just such a pure expression of community and education.
It was beautiful.
It's amazing.
But you also saw where these kids were coming from when she asks about their history, and the one girl says, what do you know? Well, we were slaves. It made me immediately think of my education of the black experience in America. Slavery, Martin Luther King. That was pretty much the extent of it in my public school system.
We're good, so shut up about it. Yeah, and the damage it's done to white students and how we ignore the damage it does to black students.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to, this doesn't need to be centered around me.
But we are damaged by it too.
Yeah.
And then this is in England, right? And so, but like, it's happening here too. And so for the series to end on that idea of community again and the empowerment of a child by making very real the damage it does to a child, but then ending on the hope of what it can do to it if we have empowered black children.
Well, and the universality of that is every student figuring out who they are in the education system.
Yes. And in the universe.
And in the universe, exactly. Yeah.
That like, they can't know where they are in the education. They can't know where they are anywhere without that knowledge of themselves, that empowerment of themselves, and then they will find their place in the universe.
There's just so much packed into this movie. I remember the first time I watched the whole series, to me, I felt like education wasn't really getting its due, because education to me is the knockout punch in this whole thing.
Absolutely.
It is what ties this whole series together into what I really do, and I'll go back to my favorites of 2020. To me, education was like, Small Axe is it. Small Axe is what makes 2020 the best. It is the best of 2020. And education, I think it has to do with the other one that makes me cry is when he's just reading. And that's how this...
Oh, yeah. What a way to end the series.
That's how the series ends. It ends with, first of all, him overcoming his own hurdle of trying to read. But that the whole series ends with a little child reading African history over images of the cosmos.
Over classical music.
with
hand clapping and rhythm. Yeah.
Like tribal percussion over traditional English chamber music.
Which lasted nearly 35 years. And during which stories about this wonderful girl who was a leader of men were told far and wide. All the young men in the surrounding tribes wanted to marry her, but she turned them and all their fine offers of wedding gifts down, and she did not need them. Amina built walls around the territories she owned.
I mean,
it was astounding the way it ended.
It would almost be like too on the nose if you didn't have
all five.
If you didn't have all of them,
this.
if you didn't have all of that, and if you also didn't have that history being read by that little child that you had just watched overcome his own individual hurdle.
Yeah.
And that hurdle was only overcome not by his willpower, although that was part of it,
but by the community.
But by the community.
Yes.
That the community saved him. And that this has cosmological ramifications, but that it also has individual soul-searching ramifications.
When I realized that was how it was ending, I literally gasped.
Yeah.
Like when I saw it said directed by Steve McQueen, I was like, he's doing this. Oh my gosh, that is perfect.
Yeah.
And that's like you said, you told me before that any individual movie of these, would they make the top 5? Maybe. But as a whole, I have not seen anything like it. And it is, I don't want to use the word perfect just because it sounds like people won't believe me, but it is, I think, perfect. The way that this is all set up and then the way it ends, I don't think it could be better.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not going to disagree with you. because I've watched it twice now, and I kept trying to find ways to kind of pick it apart, and I ended up just liking each movie better.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm going to watch it again. And we've had a few episodes where we gush, but man, it's in the experience.
This is something different. It's art.
It really is. And
history.
God bless the BBC for doing it.
Right.
For funding it and letting him make it this way. I mean, I it's been a long time, but this is a 5-star for me. I don't know the last time I've had a 5-star, but this is absolutely, without a doubt, Small Axe is a 5-star.
Yes, if you're gonna rate the whole thing as 1, without a doubt 5-star. And I will say the second time around, every one of those movies, I don't know if they they definitely moved up. I don't know if
they were all 5 stars.
If you go to my Letterboxd, I rated all of them. I don't think any of them was lower than a 4. Anyways,
if you couldn't tell, we love Small Axe. We highly recommend it.
Yeah.
And especially coming off of our episode about 2020, where we were sort of like, yeah, there was some good stuff or some stuff that was interesting to talk about. To see Small Axe and just so solidly say that's it. That is art. That is film. That is television. That is everything at what it should be.
Yeah. So I don't know where we end this best buds for sure.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely.
I think this was just an episode that was like more of a carryover from our 2020 episode of it's hard to talk about this as a single movie. So let's dedicate an episode to it. And I'm just so glad that we did that.
I am too. I don't know that I would have felt the urgency to watch it if we hadn't.
Yeah.
I definitely don't know that I would have been able to watch it in a week. Force myself to do that.
But same here. So, all right. Why don't we go ahead and pivot to what we're going to talk about in our next episode of Can't We Still Be Friends?
Well, we are finally awake to the possibilities of streaming and movies being released on streaming. We don't have to watch old movies necessarily anymore.
We don't have to live years in the past.
No.
We can live in the present, here and the now, man.
Yeah, and the present is amazing.
The present is a gift. And because of that, the other thing that has been gifted to us in the present is streaming services, which allow us to watch new, contemporary...
The day they come out.
Like live. Not quite live, but close to live.
We're letting go of the past. We're living in the now.
We don't need it. Let it go. I mean, we just did a whole podcast series about the importance of learning your past. So we're aware
we
of
learned
that.
the past. Now we can live in the future.
Live in the now.
The now. So we know the future.
Yes, which is a gift.
Right.
Wait, no. The future is the gift to come.
Okay.
Because the future will be a present.
Wait. It'll be a present?
It will be the present, which is a present and a gift. The point is streaming services.
Are you trying to make me feel bad that I didn't get you anything for Valentine's Day? Is that why this talk of gifts? I wasn't
gonna say anything, and now I'm saying something. Yes, okay. Yeah, a little bit.
I am sorry. I didn't know that you would get me such a lovely gift.
Well, I guess, and the thing is,
thoughtful. I'll say thoughtful gift. Lovely is maybe overstating it. I appreciate it.
Look. As we're recording this, Saint Valentine's Day is still 2 days away. There's still time. There's still a future.
Yeah.
It is not... Valentine's Day is not a present yet.
Right. Who said I didn't get you a gift?
I didn't say anything. You're the one that brought that up. I didn't say anything about Valentine's
Day. I just feel like all this talk of gifts...
felt like...
And you conspicuously have nothing in front of you, and I clearly have this edible arrangement.
Incredibly edible.
It is. All of it is. And I appreciate it.
It was a gesture of 7 years of podcasting together, but obviously that doesn't mean a whole lot to you. So let's just move on to our episode.
Okay. So next month, March, we have, I guess, the highly anticipated sequel.
I think so.
To Coming to America, the classic Eddie Murphy, Arsenio Hall comedy.
But I've never seen it.
Interesting, and I have.
Okay.
So is the new movie called Coming to America?
I think so. Yeah, I was looking at so it's not like Coming to America 2. It's
right.
Also not Coming to America 2 TOO, like also.
Right.
It's Coming number 2
America. So you've never seen it, and
no, but it's been on my list.
But you are excited about the sequel?
Yes, because when I saw that the sequel was coming, and it's coming on Amazon Prime,
right,
March 5th, I believe.
Okay.
It was like, oh, that's a movie I've always meant to see.
And now it's on Prime. The original's on Prime.
The original's there, and I'm like, you know what? That's going to be my excuse. I'm excited about checking something off my list that's been on there for, frankly, years. I mean, I've seen quite a few Eddie Murphy movies, but like,
yeah,
there's a lot I haven't seen.
And did you see Dolomite Is My Name?
And I loved it.
And are we in the Edisons?
There's like Murphy periods, you know, and this is sort of like a third era. Yeah.
Third wave, the Edisons. I don't know what emphasis to put on that.
Well, you gotta be careful because it could sound like you're referencing Thomas Edison if you're not careful.
Edisons,
the Edisons. No, so not the Edisons, which was sort of when the light bulb.
I think the Edisons.
Yeah,
that works.
Actually, I don't even think we mentioned that yet. We're gonna do both movies.
Oh yeah. Sorry, everybody. Whew.
Yeah, jeez. I mean, we kind of got away from it. So we're gonna do both movies: Coming to America and Coming to America,
which won't be confusing.
Which we haven't. We didn't even do Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2. We just did
Wayne's World and Austin Powers.
So I don't know if we've done like an original movie with the sequel. We just did Small Axe, which was like multiple movies. But
if you haven't heard that episode, go back to the beginning of this one and listen.
Just cut it.
What a weird time to join.
But people do it because they love the banter.
People come for the banter.
They love the banter.
We shouldn't, yeah.
But so another groundbreaking Can We Still Be Friends episode.
2020 disrupted our routine.
Right.
And we've embraced it and made disrupting our routine our new routine.
How are we going to disrupt this time? That's the conversation we have.
Right.
So who knows how we're going to disrupt things in the future. If you've got ideas for how we could disrupt this podcast more.
Mm-hmm. Well, our routine, yeah.
But we would love to hear those ideas, along with any of your thoughts about this episode, about Small Axe. If you've got thoughts about Coming to America or Coming to America.
Or the Edisons.
The Edisons.
As a term or as a concept for Eddie Murphy's career. I would love your feedback.
Yeah. Lots of different ways to do that. Email feedback@canwestillbefriends.net. There's also our website where you can see our entire archive, 90 episodes.
90, worth,
90 episodes worth of material to dig through. And any one of those episodes you can comment on our website, canwestillbefriends.net. Ryan, we've got social media, don't we?
We do. Head over to facebook.com and find Can We Still Be Friends podcast. And on Instagram, we shorten it for convenience sake. Mm-hmm. Can We Still Be Friends pod.
You can also reach out to us with your vocals, your voice.
Those old vocals. Dust off the vocals.
That's right, yeah. Send those vocal messages to 847-306-9532. The other way you can do that is obviously to use your voice recorder app on your phone, package that up into a little audio file and email it to us.
Yeah.
All right, well, we want to thank all of you listeners out there. Hey, if there's any listeners out there who have been with us this entire 7 years, man.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, if anybody's been a 7-year listener, go ahead and
let us know.
Let us know. We would love to hear who you are. I guess that's it.
I think that's it, yeah. We look forward to next month, Coming to America. Watch it with us, and I guess, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks.